Hi everyone, it's Agnieszka from 5 Minute Language. Welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. So today's video is about something that I know many of you are interested in, especially if you're learning English, and it's about how to sound more British or how to develop a British English accent when speaking English. So over the years, I've developed what people describe as a British accent. People often tell me that I sound British or I sound English. So I thought it would be useful for me to share with you some of my tips or some of the things that I've done in the past to make sure that my English sounds a bit more British, because that's what I was interested in, that's what I was focusing on, and I've got some tips for you to share with you today. First, a little disclaimer. There isn't really such a thing as a British accent because the UK is such a big country. It's made up of lots of different regions and people speak differently in those regions. So for example, if you're from London, then you sound completely differently to somebody from Liverpool or Manchester or Scotland or Wales. So I'm not going to talk about all of these different accents. I'm just going to focus on some general rules that apply to received pronunciation, which is the standard way of speaking in the south of England, the kind of English that's used on the BBC, for example. So if you're looking for information on how to speak with a Scottish accent or one of the northern accents, then this is not the video that you should be watching. I'm just covering some general rules. So the first tip I've got for you, basically the most basic thing that you will notice when you speak to a British English speaker, is the way they pronounce their R's. So in American English, the R is enunciated differently. It's more like R, whereas in British English, it can be kind of silent. So for example, in the word boring, you can hear it, it's R, whereas in the word better, you can't really hear it. You can hear the schwa sound at the end, better. Compare that with boring. So the general rule is that if the R is followed by a vowel, then you pronounce it, and if it's not, then you just do the R. So if you think about what your tongue is doing in your mouth, it's kind of at the bottom of your mouth and it's flat and it's relaxed and it's not really moving in any way. So if you're speaking with an American accent, your tongue will be moving to make that R sound, whereas in British English, your tongue is kind of flat and relaxed at the bottom of your mouth. So think about it that way. The next tip relates to enunciating consonants, and particularly the letter T. So for example, in the word better, you can hear the T and it's pronounced in the same way as it's written. So in American English, it might sound more like a D. So I'm sorry, I can't speak with an American accent, but it would sound more like better. So you can kind of hear a D sound, whereas in British English, you pronounce it the way it's written, so it's better, better. You can hear the T sound. The next thing to be aware of when it comes to the British accent is the glottal stop, which is basically a little gap, which is caused by blocking the flow of air in your throat. So for example, in the word better, people who pronounce it with the glottal stop will say something like better, better. You can hear there is a little gap, a little pause in the middle of the word when the air in your throat is blocked, better. This is sometimes considered as a lazy way of speaking. I don't think that's the case. It's just part of the evolution of language, and although it's not something that they would say on the BBC, it's something that many people do in normal conversations when you have conversations with British English speakers. So you will notice it and it's good to be aware of it. I'm not saying that you should learn to speak like that, but I'm saying that you should be aware of it, and as you become better at speaking with a British accent, you will naturally develop that way of speaking, because that's just the way things go. So for me, sometimes I don't realize, but I do it myself. I don't do it consciously, but I do it. The next tip relates to how you pronounce the sound U. So the letter U in words such as new or duty, it sounds basically like the U sound in the word you. So in American English, it might sound more like U. So for example, when you say the word new in American English, it might sound more like nu, or the word duty might sound more like duty. I'm sorry again, I don't speak with an American accent, but that's basically the main difference. So make sure you pronounce it as you. My next tip relates to pronouncing the letter A in words such as father or grass. And basically the way it's pronounced is something that people do in the south of England. If you're from the north, I do realize that that's not how you pronounce it, but in the south of England, the letter A is the sound is kind of elongated. Imagine if there was an R following the A and how you would pronounce that. So father sounds a bit like father. And the word grass sounds again like gra with an R after the A with an S at the end. So the next one is maybe slightly controversial because it's something that some people do but other people don't. I think British English, like any other accent or any other language, evolves constantly and people change the way they speak. But I thought I'd mention it just in case, is the pronunciation of O and how it's pronounced kind of like O rather than O. So in British English, some people who speak with received pronunciation will say no instead of no. It's almost like an eh sound that's part of the double vowel that's in there somewhere. So an example sentence I found to practice this sound is, no, I do not know if I'll go to the show tomorrow. If you're English and you're listening to this, you probably thought, what is this woman saying? It's silly, nobody speaks like that. And it's true, but it's good to be kind of aware that that still exists in British English pronunciation. So yeah, I thought I'd mention it at the end, why not? And my final tip is again in relation to the letter O, which is pronounced very differently to how it's pronounced in American English. So for example, in the word stop, it's pronounced O rather than sort of a, like in American English. So American people might say stop, whereas British English will say stop. It's definitely an O sound. And finally, when you're learning English and you want to sound more British, you should focus on learning British English vocabulary and expressions. So words and expressions that exist specifically in British English, such as the word knackered or gutted, words that are used often by British English speakers and are often not understood by American English speakers, for example. So it's an important element of doing that. If you know those expressions, if you know how to use them, you will sound more British. So how do you actually practice? How do you do it? So I definitely recommend that you watch a lot of British English shows. If you've got Netflix, there are lots of BBC dramas on there. Listen to podcasts, listen to the radio, and use a technique called mirroring. It's something I've spoken about on my blog in the past, and it's basically a technique that involves imitating the way somebody is speaking. So when you listen to something, pause after each sentence and try to mirror, try to imitate exactly word for word the way they said it. Focus on intonation as well, because British English is not just about pronunciation, it's also about intonation, the musicality of the language, how it goes up and down. So make sure you focus on that when mirroring somebody's speech, and also focus on how different sounds sound together, how they make up words, how different words sound together, and you will be able to become more confident and develop a more British way of speaking English. So I wish you all the best, good luck. If you have any questions about British English, then let me know in the comments below and I'll try to answer them in the next video. So I'll see you next time. Bye!